So finding a way to sit that is relaxed, also alert, a sense of being upright, a sense of being in balance. And then allowing the awareness to penetrate the body. Especially you can notice the places where the body is connected to the earth. Maybe a sense of yielding to that connection, allowing the body to be fully supported. And it's sensing into how is it in this moment? What sensations are most prominent? As you connect with various sensations, noticing pleasant, noticing unpleasant, noticing neither. Noticing if there are any emotions present and gently connecting, receiving, feeling. And then noticing the attitude of the mind. Is it like in the thinking cognitive mind? And the flavor of the thinking? Is it kind and friendly or complaining and aversive? However it is, just noticing. And then maybe a sense of softening, softening any gripping in the mind, and softening any part of the body that could use some softening, releasing, opening. Maybe softening the face, softening the jaw, the neck and the shoulders. And taking a few moments to connect with and soften any part of the body. Meditation instruction from the Buddha, breathing in, relaxing the body, breathing out, relaxing the body. And as you continue to relax, noticing that the body is breathing. Letting the awareness rest on the feeling of the breath moving in and out of the body. This sense of skillfully disengaging from the world. Well, the field of awareness is filled with the sensations of the breath, and everything else more or less fades into the background. There's nothing to get, nothing to get rid of. Just resting in awareness. Breathing in, aware of the in-breath. Breathing out, aware of the out-breath. Simple. If you wish, you can loosen the grip on the breath and allowing a moment of open awareness, letting the attention gravitate to whatever it chooses and just being present with that experience without being lost in it. Sense of widening the field. Noticing where the awareness is now. We can end our period of formal practice by bringing to mind one or two things that you're grateful for. And then connecting with gratitude as a felt sense in the body. Noticing where it's located. Feeling tone is usually quite pleasant. Be inviting that inner smile of gratitude to pervade more and more of the body. Letting the sound of the bell guide the attention outward. So today I thought I would talk about the 7 factors of awakening. Has anybody heard of this teaching, 7 factors of awakening? Can anybody name the 7 factors of awakening? This will be our aspiration that by the end of this time, you will have heard it so many times that um, you'll be able to muster the 7. Um, so the 7 factors of awakening are mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. The mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. And this is a teaching that appears at least several times in the collections of the teachings of the Buddha. It often shows up when someone is ill or someone is dying. The Buddha will instruct his disciples to instruct that person on the 7 factors of awakenings, even an account of when the Buddha was unwell, that he asked his disciple to read this as it's like kind of a sense that it's a kind of medicine. Um, Buddha is often, spoken of as like the physician with the cures to all that ail us in this human realm. So I like that image of like something comforting about this teaching. And it points to, there's a quote that it kind of like points to. It's like, just as the great rivers incline towards the ocean, slope toward the ocean, flow towards the ocean, and merge with the ocean, in the same way, the awakening factors incline toward Nibbana, slope toward Nibbana, flow toward Nibbana, and merge in Nibbana. It's a sense of like, just as the rivers sort of inexorably wind their way down to the oceans, that if we practice the 7 factors of awakening, it inexorably pushes in the direction of awakening. The Buddha uses an analogy of a hen sitting on an egg. And it doesn't matter if the The hen wants the egg to hatch, doesn't want egg to hatch, sort of ambivalent about the egg hatching. As long as it's creating the conditions, keeping it warm, whatever else hens do, then the egg will inevitably hatch. We can have these sort of deep liberative insights that can happen in a finger snap, just a moment of like realization or understanding or uh, hearing something for the uptime time, and it means something different to us. But these types of moments usually happen when we have lots of moments of practice leading up to that moment. So they're kind of taught as a sequence in the sense that each one leads to the next. Each one is a supporting condition for the next. So mindfulness is the supporting condition for investigation. Investigation is the supporting condition for energy. Energy is the supporting condition for joy. Joy is the supporting condition for tranquility. And tranquility is the supporting condition for concentration. And concentration is the supporting condition for equanimity. Um, the first time I heard this, a couple of things. It never really grokked that uh, for the mind to be really concentrated, there has to be a sense of tranquility in the body. This is why, like I often emphasize, like I did this evening, the idea of relaxing the body to sort of create that sort of relaxed, tranquil environment in which the mind can be more collected, more gathered. The other thing is that you remember from the first time I heard teaching is the seven factors of awakening in the language of the Buddha, language in which the teachings are written down, Pali. It's the Bojjhanga Sutta. But when I heard it, uh, I heard Bojangles Sutta, and I thought it was like, the setup for a joke, but the joke never came. So they have different qualities, energetic qualities. Mindfulness is neutral, it sort of balances the energy. Investigation, energy, and joy are energizing, and tranquility, concentration, and equanimity are calming. So this is one way you can actually just apply this in your meditation practice. You could see like, is the energy kind of low, and kind of nudge yourself in the direction of, usually we say more investigation, getting more interested, getting more curious. Maybe there's a way to invoke a sense of joy. Um, Conversely, if there's too much energy, kind of bringing more attention to the conditions that lead to a sense of tranquility or the practices that lead to the gathering of the mind. And each one has a kind of like, is said to be the antidote for an obstacle. So mindfulness counters delusion, investigation counters doubt, energy counters laziness and sloth, joy counters ill will and depression, tranquility counters restlessness, concentration counters distraction, and equanimity counters clinging and craving. We with this practice, we talk a lot about the obstacles, we talk about the hindrances, we talk about the poisons, we talk about the taints, the defilements, all these kinds of things that stand in the way, which kind of makes sense because those are the things that show up when we begin to practice. Um, Here's a different orientation, which is to focus on the things that actually do bring a sense of well-being and do bring maturity on the path. And the main meditation instruction that the Buddha gave is just to know the presence or absence of each factor of awakening, kind of like a way of valuation is not evaluation is not quite the right word, but a way of checking in to see like how is our practice in balance in some way. So mindfulness is the foundation of all this. This is where it starts. Um, this is where we have the most stewardship. It's the most it's the thing that we can most do. Like we have develop a stewardship over the mind where we can rouse mindfulness. And it's kind of a remarkable movement of the mind. Like we go through life, awareness is always operating, and we couldn't do anything if we weren't aware of uh, the things in our environment, the things internally. And yet often there's a sense that we're just being carried along by experience. It's like we're watching a movie and we're completely absorbed in it. And then the movement of mindfulness is like you're watching a movie, you're completely absorbed with it, you're feeling what the characters are feeling, and then the doorbell rings. And then suddenly something has shifted, and you're now aware that you're watching a movie. Um, this movement of the mind where we just are aware that we're aware of what we're aware of. We're not being carried along by sometimes we call it trance of thought or the um, locked in our conceptual world of uh, thoughts and ideas and concepts, which is never quite, is always an approximation. It's never going to be the actual world. And just this movement of mind, just this movement from being captured and sometimes enthralled or sometimes demoralized by our experience to being aware that the experience is happening, there's a kind of relief in it. There's a kind of um, space, a kind of de-identification, there's like a little bit of room. Thich Nhat Hanh said, if the mind is filled with sadness, there's only sadness there. But when you bring mindfulness, now the mind is full of mindfulness and sadness. So there's less sadness in some way. The mere presence of mindfulness is almost a universal antidote to um, the things that hinder us, the things that, we're talking about the five classical hindrances: desire, aversion, doubt, restlessness, uh, sleepiness. Um, the word for those hindrances in Pali is nivarana, which means like to cast a spell or to cover over, that we can see what's being covered over, the moment of restlessness, and to see, oh, there's restlessness, or a moment of doubt, to see, oh, there's doubt. It's the linchpin of almost all this practice, is this posture of awareness, receptive awareness. So mindfulness is a supporting condition for investigation. So this is, we talk about vipassana, seeing through, cutting through. Um, this word investigation is Dhamma vichaya, which means to distinguish, to separate, to analyze. I like the term deconstruct. So we're practicing mindfulness of breathing, we can get really detailed and nuanced about different aspects of the breath, especially when we arouse an interest. Um, the rhythm of the breath, the texture of the breath, the places where we feel the breath prominently and the places where we feel the breath subtly. Uh, but in any experience, particularly in an experience that is stressful, where we might be experiencing some reactivity, uh, we can deconstruct that experience in a way that makes it much easier to manage. One of the ways that's talked about to do this is to uh, tease apart components of experience. So one component of any experience usually is that there's a narrative, there's a story, there's thoughts that are appearing in the mind as words and images. So we can notice that, notice what's the story here, and then let it go, let it be. Then there's the emotional terrain, these constellation of sensations that we recognize as sadness, anger, anxiety, connect with that experience, and then we can connect with the most discrete manifestation of the experience, which is in the realm of temperature, pressure, vibration, tingling, pulsing. It's almost always easier. There's a difficult experience happening. It's almost always easier to be with tingling, vibration, pressure than it is the enormity of the stories that the mind can connect or the intensity of emotions that can be produced. So this sense of interest that arises when we get really interested in our experience, um, it's like this a desire to know, like what's really happening here. What's you know, sometimes people use the guidance. It's like this now. Like we just like this can even be wordless. It's the feeling of it's like this now. Well, so this interest, this investigation kind of arises naturally once our mindfulness is established. Um, and that interest leads to energy. Like on some level, we all experience this. Like if we get really interested in some project, you know, then like the time just flies, you know, like all of a sudden you look at the clock and it's really late because the energy that comes from that interest. And this energy is so helpful in meditation practice. It can be a feeling, oops, too much energy. There can be a feeling of like a movement from I'm practicing, where practicing is like a labor, to almost like I'm being practiced. Something is moving through me, kind of effortlessness. It's like we're riding a wave of energy in our practice. And this energy can be physical energy, uh, even more helpful actually when it's a kind of spiritual energy or a kind of psychic mental energy, the energy that keeps the mind sort of bright and clear and able to be present. The word in Pali for energy is virya, which is related to the English word virile. So it's kind of like a connotation that it's a kind of heroic, very young, kind of like courageous effort. Mm. Sometimes it does take a kind of courage or bravery to show up for whatever's happening in our experience. And when we muster that courage to be present in a difficult moment, we're building the capacity to do that more and more. And energy is a supporting condition for the arising of joy. Sometimes this is, in a more meditative context, it's like rapture, bliss. It's like uh, attention has become really wrapped, like have this like has an energetic quality associated with it too. It's like can be like a spectrum from like just goosebumps to a kind of like sometimes practitioners, even on 7-day retreats will report that they felt as if they were levitating and actually had to open their eyes to see because it felt so like the body feels so light, sort of like our sense of the body as material is shifting. Well, Pali word for this is piti, and it's translated variously as joy, gladness, delight, rapture, rapt attention, zest, and bliss. And interesting, just as an aside, one of the arising preconditions for joy is faith or trust or confidence. And something has to shift in our relationship to our own suffering and our own well-being. It's like a it's like a sense that there is a better way. It's that kind of like the joy that arises when you see that a problem has a solution. You don't even have to have solved it yet, but there's kind of like an uplift or enthusiasm when you see, oh wow, there might be a way here, might be a way to move through the world more skillfully. I like the word faith, but I also, acknowledge that it has some, uh, I call it baggage for people. Like uh, the Buddhist conception of faith is very much tended to be empowering, not disempowering. So faith doesn't mean we necessarily take the word of others, but really that we have some conviction, some confidence, so, a strong belief in the possibility of our own transformation. If we don't have that, then actually we wouldn't be here if we didn't have some notion of the possibility for growth. So this piti, this version of joy is what's called a non-sensual joy. It's a kind of like spiritual joy, and thus considered to be very wholesome, considered to be very forward leading. In fact, the Buddha famously was practicing in very austere ways after he left home, eating just like a few morsels of food. And at one point, he decided he would like breathe very sparingly, like hold his breath for long periods of time. And it was some notion that was popular in the time that this was the way to overcome desire, that you just sort of beat the body into submission. And then at some point he realized he was dying. It's like very graphic images of him describing touching his belly and feeling his spine and his eyes being sunken and his complexion being gaunt and rubbing his head and the hair would fall out. And it's like really dire circumstance. And you sometimes you see these statues. There's actually one at Spirit Rock that it's the emaciated Buddha. And it's a Buddha, and you could see all his ribs. You can see all the, and I find that very poignant because I think I know so many people in our culture who are suffering from that kind of a burnout, like overzealousness to whatever it is we're doing. Like uh, some of you know, my background is as a corporate lawyer. The first few years of my career, it was like the only thing. I didn't really have a life outside that. Uh, but his great insight in the moment where he realized that he was about to die was, there must be another way. And he had this memory of being a child at a harvest festival of some kind and spontaneously going into a kind of absorbed state. Um, it seems to happen more in children, but it can happen, where the conditions are just right, a moment of awe or a moment of beauty, where the mind just kind of goes quiet. sense of self is more diminished. And he saw that that was a kind of spiritual joy, and that joy was not to be avoided, and in fact was essential for the path. So this rapture, joy, bliss, zest, kind of the feeling is like that kind of like it bubbles over. There's a kind of energetic transformation that happens in the system, and then when it bubbles over, what's left is tranquility, like a profound physical and mental calmness, a kind of happiness that's like more refined than joy. Joy has a kind of energeticness to it. And this is also a characteristic of the seven factors, is that each one has a kind of um, each one is more pleasing than the next in some way. It's become more and more refined and subtle. It's like the tranquility has the all the positive flavors of joy, but without the kind of energy of joy. And then that state of tranquility naturally leads to the mind being more gathered. Um, Kind of intuitive on one level, like when there's tranquility and calmness, there's there's not vigilance in the mind, the kind of vigilance that can keep the mind moving around. Um, and concentration, Pali word samadhi, is considered to be a profoundly healing state. Um, the mind is composed, the mind is collected, the mind is gathered, mind is malleable, mind is calm. And it feel like in that state of mind, um, some problems just get dissolved. Some of the things that, we might have or not have on our sort of like spiritual aspiration list, they just they lose their energy. And then concentration is the preceding condition for equanimity. Equanimity may be seen as close to the fruition of the path. Mind is stable, unperturbed. Mm. You hear these similes like unshakable mind, mind like a mountain, solid, immovable, cannot be taken off center, or the suppleness of bamboo that can bend in the wind and not break. One of the definitions of equanimity I really like is impartiality of mind. When I think about the things that disturb my equanimity, they're mostly in the realm of preferences. Uh, I like this condition over that condition. I'm not getting that condition, so the mind is unhappy. There's reactivity. Impartiality of mind is this notion that the mind is not preferencing any specific conditions. We're freeing ourselves from our happiness and well-being being so conditioned, so dependent on the external world. Give me a sense that the mind is sky-like, vast enough to hold anything and everything. The quote, imagine a sky empty, spacious, and pure from the beginning. The essence of mind is like this. Imagine a sun, luminous, clear, unobstructed, and spontaneously present. The nature of mind is like this. Imagine that the sun is shining out impartially on us and all things, penetrating in all directions. The energy of mind, which is the manifestation of compassion, is like this. Nothing can obstruct it, and it pervades everywhere. Sometimes we talk about like the capital M mind or the big mind, and the lowercase mind, the capital M mind, this capacity to know our experience uh, is completely receptive and non-rejecting. If a sound appears in consciousness, if the ears work, the sound appears, we hear the sound. Um, and then there's the little M mind that comes in and it's like, I don't like that sound, or I want more of that sound. I want less of that sound. and this quality of non-rejection, this quality of non-discrimination is feels very much like compassion or love. Mm. Ram Dass's teacher, Neem Karoli Baba, famously taught equanimity is by just saying love everything, which is a kind of nice simplicity to it until you try to do it. And then I'll end famously with the words of the sixth Zen patriarch: the great way is not difficult for those who hold no attachment to preferences. The way is perfect as vast space is perfect, where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess. When the mind exists undisturbed in the way, there is no objection to anything in the world. So mindfulness, investigation, energy, joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. In any moment of practice, or actually in any moment, sometimes I feel like even in real life situations, there's like a moment of difficulty. What would be most supportive? What could I add to this situation to make it more uh, harmonious in some way? Anybody have any comment or question or thought?
Can I ask a question from the here video?
Absolutely.
First, thank you. This is incredible. Um, I was just wondering if you could repeat what you said towards the beginning about you mentioned that like mindfulness counters delusions.
Yeah.
And then I got lost and didn't get to know all of them, but I really liked those.
Yeah. Of course. So mindfulness counters delusion. Mm. Sometimes we say ignorance there because it's like ignorance is like not knowing or ignoring. And mindfulness is some way like the opposite of ignoring. Investigation counters doubt. So if we're unclear about the nature of our experience, we can investigate it, clear up our doubt. Energy counters laziness and sloth. Uh, joy counters ill will and depression. Joy also counters sloth or sleepiness, like because there's an energizing quality to joy. Tranquility counters restlessness. Concentration counters distraction, basically the opposite of distraction. And equanimity counters clinging and craving.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I mean, that is actually one of the most important things is to see that each of these has a kind of like positive impact on the mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's helpful to know like noticing when, you know, ignorance or doubt or laziness is coming up and what that might be saying about these different things. Anyways, that's really helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Can you explain how equanimity counters whatever the things were that you
Craving and
yeah, thank you.
clinging and craving. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in some way, equanimity is almost seen as the fruition of the path. Like, these are the factors to awakening, enlightenment, nibbana. It's not really said if, like, my sense is that, like, the next thing on the list, the eighth thing would be awakening. So by the time you get to equanimity, um, the mind is basically undisturbed. Conventionally, we go around, the mind gets very easily disturbed by uh, things we don't like, people who annoy us, people who are doing things we don't approve of, mm, even mundane things like the conditions in the room aren't to our satisfaction. That this um, be a very strong attachment to our preferences, and there's a kind of hidden paradigm that we get from some of it is probably biological, but certainly our society gives us this paradigm that is like, okay, the recipe for happiness, recipe for well-being is to check all these things off our list, satisfy all these worldly desires of like it could be anything, having a nice place to live or having a good career or in good relationships and which is all great. There's no like judgment against that, except that uh, we're in trouble if we believe that we're going to achieve happiness and well-being that's durable by satisfying all these desires, checking off. And we all know that, right? One thing, you get the thing's done, and there's like a moment of euphoria, and then you're on to the next thing. One of my teachers is a national champion wrestler, and he talked about how, he works so hard, for years. You talk about his training, 100 push-ups a day, walking on his hands across football fields, all the weight training and countless injuries in wrestling, and then, wins the national championship and they put the medal on his around his neck and he raises his hand in triumph. And it's like a beautiful moment. It was all worthwhile. And then like, how long are you going to hold your hand up there? And then minutes later, you're thinking about, well, who am I going to have to wrestle next year? Or, I better get back to my training. Um, so this illusion that we are going to get, like last week I talked about, I read a quote that says like, looking for a place unscathed, like looking for a place of refuge, looking for a place of safety, well-being, ease, belonging, whatever it is in our sort of constitution that would be the thing, um, comes internally. It doesn't come from external circumstances. It doesn't come from satisfying our uh, cravings or getting rid of the things that we're averse to. I don't know if that answers that question. Yeah. I mean, generally the principal paradigm in this whole Buddhist path is that our suffering, our stress, our mental reactivity comes from clinging and aversion. So equanimity, this balance of mind where there's, or awakening, just like almost like the next thing, necessarily requires that we freed ourselves from captivity to this craving and aversion. Alexis.
Yeah, I'll share a little experience. And yeah, that was a beautiful talk. Thank you, Gullu. I'm reminded of years and years ago, I was living with one of my best friends, and I would always like complain about being tired. And one time she told me, she was like, well, you just got to stop thinking that you're tired or something. I was like, what? Like, if you're tired, it's because you need to sleep. It's not for any other reason. Um, but I preface that for what I wanted to share, which was about an experience I had on a retreat last year. And um, I was so really blown away because, the first couple of days, of course, I was like struggling with drowsiness, and it was really unpleasant, when you're going to be meditating all day and it's only like 10 a.m. and you're like, oh gosh, like, oh man. But I was really fascinated that at some point, and now that, you gave this framework of the kind of the 7 factors and what supports the next, like doing the investigation of the experience of the breath and kind of getting so, I guess, engaged with that
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing else to do. But getting really engaged with that. And then it was like that experience of the drowsiness completely went away.
Yeah.
And I was so shocked because, I never had that experience. But after the drowsiness went away, then just even feeling that energy was so pleasant to not have that drowsiness there. And I was like, whoa, I am just fine sitting here. And it really was kind of that like joyful, there's like a joy to that because it's just like this simplicity that, wow, it gets to be kind of like, oh, there's not really another place I'd rather be kind of thing. And then from there, yeah, it does. There's like a sense of peace that just kind of sets in of like, great, this is what I'm doing. And there's not really another better moment out there.
Yeah.
And so it really, then when your mind's not trying to like do all this other stuff, then it just like gets concentrated. And then after I'm concentrated, I realize, oh, I don't really want to lose that concentration. I know that's like another thing, but it really encouraged me to want to keep practicing because it was like a pleasant experience. And anyway, it went to show that about the tiredness thing. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't repeatedly think like how tired I am. And I guess when you do the investigation of it, it does really help. And there's like a different experience. And now when I meditate, I actually, instead of thinking about like, I used to think kind of like, oh, like how long has it been or how long to go? But now it's kind of different because I know my mind is going to settle, and it might take 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but I know it'll settle. So I'm actually like, I'm fine sitting here because that's going to be nice when it finally settles.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to experience that.
Yeah, it's like retreat practice is a really nice time to like just track the awakening factors because it's kind of like clockwork. And then I really appreciate the thing that you said is like once we know the mind will come down, um, that actually helps create the condition that the mind is more likely to come down more quickly. One of the things that I notice with people who come to retreat for the first time is they think, it's like the second day and they're still sleepy and or still agitated and restless, and they think, oh, well, this is it, this is the experience. But once you've seen that, like when the conditions are right, the mind and the body will respond, that's a kind of like gives you kind of faith or confidence. And it's interesting 'cause fatigue is it's real. I mean, it's obviously a real thing of fatigue, but this is like how much the mind influences fatigue over the holidays. I was with there's a bunch of kids, and so the kids are like, like under 10, and gets to be a certain time of the evening, and they're like, "Ah, I'm so tired," and then parents are, "Well, we go to sleep." Well, I don't want to miss anything. I'm so tired. But then somebody, it was the grandparents, of course, said, "How about ice cream?" And then all of a sudden, everybody's full of energy. It's like the orientation to the moment changes, and then how we're experiencing energy in that moment also changes. Yeah.
I don't know if any of you saw the movie that came out a couple years ago um, about the toilet bowl cleaner in Tokyo.
Hmm.
Did you see it? Yeah. And the first thing I thought about in that movie really was equanimity and the balance, the acceptance of joy and sadness together
Hmm.
as part of life. And he obviously experiences both in great degrees during the film. And at the end, there's a scene where he's driving and he's crying, but the tears are not necessarily sad tears. They're joyful, sort of a balance between the two and an acceptance. And I just thought it was a beautiful film. I can't remember the name of it now.
Yeah, sounds good. It sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think acceptance is a big part. We don't maybe use that word so much in Buddhist practice, but it's the concept is there, like accepting this moment just as it is, being able to ride the waves of the worldly winds of grief and happiness and pain and pleasure and loss and gain. Um, the teachings were preserved for hundreds of years through this oral tradition, and considered to be very reliable. People learned the suttas like songs. And I was at some event where somebody was asking about this, and the person responding said, like, we think about like all the number one hits for the last 20, 30 years. As a group, we could probably put together the lyrics of most of those songs. Thank you, everyone. These Wednesday nights are offered freely, and also your support is vital. You had an opportunity to make a contribution when you registered. There's also the opportunity to do that here now. And I really appreciate the support.